All right, let's hit the field.
Cody Bellinger, former Rookie of the Year, MVP, World Champion, Silver Slugger, and the 2023 Comeback Player of the Year for the Chicago Cubs. But at just 29 years old, word round the campfire is that the Chicago Cubs have made him available for trades. With openings in the outfield and at first base, the Yankees have been seen as a fit and have been rumored to be involved. Tonight, we're speaking with Patrick Mooney, senior writer for The Athletic, covering the Cubs and Major League Baseball, and the co-host of one of our sister podcasts, Northside Territory, about who Cody Bellinger is at this point in his career and whether or not the Yankees are a good fit. Get your comments ready. This is Pinstripe Territory.
Just wanted to talk, that's all.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, and welcome to Patrick Mooney making his Pinstripe Territory debut. Patrick, I feel like we're at that calm before the storm phase for the MLB offseason. Are you ready for a busy month of December?
Yeah, no doubt. Each offseason had its own sort of rhythm, but this is definitely kind of a time where I guess most teams except for the Dodgers sort of shut it down for a little bit. And then obviously that week leading into the winter meetings and then the winter meetings show. I think it won't be a show about nothing this time. I think stuff will actually happen, which will be a lot of good news for people like us who need to come up with content, you know?
Well, the good news is that Scott Boras is already ahead of last year's pace in terms of getting his guys signed.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Cody Bellinger. Earlier this week and late last week, there were some reports that the Cubs are possibly shopping Cody Bellinger around on the trade market after he opted into his contract. As somebody who's in the know about such things, are the rumors true? And if so, how serious are the Cubs about moving them, and what's motivating them to move him?
Well, look, I mean, this front office is extremely open-minded. If Jed Hoyer could trade Anthony Rizzo, Javier Baez, and Chris Bryant in like a 24-hour period, he certainly isn't going to feel overly sentimental about Cody Bellinger's 2 years with the Cubs, which have been very good for Bellinger individually, but it was 83 wins each time. And you mentioned Scott Boras. This deal with the Cubs was designed for him to be a free agent right now. Like all those Boras deals with the opt-outs, like if a player returns, usually something went wrong. And it's not like Bellinger had a bad season. I think it's more just he felt like there's a lot more there. We'll get into his defense's health, some other stuff, but ultimately the Cubs in a weird season had a couple really good things happen at the primary positions where Bellinger has value, and that's Pete Crow Armstrong becoming a major league caliber center fielder, and Michael Busch becoming a nice two-way player on a pre-arbitration salary. So it's like if Bellinger's not playing center or first, you don't really want to make Seiya Suzuki a full-time designated hitter in November, even though Bellinger's clearly a superior defender in right field, a Gold Glove caliber guy. And, the Cubs don't spend like the Yankees. They spend more than the White Sox and the teams in their division. So that chunk, roughly $30 million, I think they feel like they could maybe use that in other ways. It's not like they're trying to just get rid of him. It's more of kind of the reality of this offseason for them.
Do you think that the market is going to show more value for him as an outfielder or as a first baseman? You've mentioned that he plays two positions. Obviously, a lot of different teams have different needs. Are there people who are looking for a center fielder? I know there's teams looking for a first baseman. The Yankees are. Are there multiple teams that are in on him, do you think?
Well, I think his ultimate value is as a center fielder, and I don't know how long he would stick there, but if you're only talking about a year, I don't know if he's going to be as good as he was in center when he first came to the Cubs. Clearly, Pete Crow Armstrong, while still a very raw hitter, showed flashes of being a Gold Glove caliber center fielder for years to come. So, as you know, like two-way center fielders are really hard to find. And I'd imagine if you're the Yankees, that maybe Aaron Judge not playing center field all the time would be a good way to maybe protect your investment, very long-term investment. But otherwise, I think part of it, and this is where he did fit well with Craig Counsell, of you can move him around. I mean, he can play all three outfield positions. He can play first base. He does it all with really good, like, game awareness. He has speed. Like, there's a lot to like about Cody Bellinger, even though his name has been in trade rumors for a while, and also in that kind of free agent cycle of not quite getting what he wanted or not anticipating that he'd get what he wanted. That's why he's staying with the Cubs. But I don't know. He's a nice piece to have.
Yeah, I like good baseball players. He seems like he's a good baseball. And right now the Yankees are kind of lacking in some of those tertiary skills like base running and things like that. It kind of felt weird being in the World Series where everything's on the line and you're conceding your defense. You're conceding the base running and just trying to win on strikeouts and home runs there. So, I think there's a lot he could add to the Yankees. So let's talk a little bit about where he is offensively at this point of his career. Obviously, he had a really great bounce back 2023. Numbers kind of dipped a little bit this year. They took a little bit of a downturn. We can take a look at some of the StatCast numbers as we talk through it. But you see the xWOBA was down, the barrel percentage is down, hard hit percentage is in the 15th percentile. Bat speed is something that worries me. It's in the 13th percentile, and the chase percentage was down. But he does square the ball up. He's very good at avoiding strikeouts. He's in the 85th percentile. And for those of you listening, he's also in the 77th percentile of running speed. And he's above average as a baseball player in batting run value, base running value, and fielding run value. How do you kind of look at his profile versus, what your eye test tells you?
Well, I think there's two things you said there, Derek, that really stood out. Like, I'm not going to pretend to know more about the Yankees than you do, but I don't know, watching the World Series, reading some of the coverage, it was, a certain lack of fundamentals or situational awareness, just some of those little things that Cody Bellinger does do well. Obviously, he grew up as the son of a former Yankee, Clay Bellinger, like just someone who kind of knows what he's doing out there. And I love the idea of, I like good baseball players because sometimes I feel like we twist ourselves into knots trying to like explain this or that. Like, he does a lot of things well at an above average level. Now, those blue zones we're seeing, I think, is part of why he came back to the Cubs last year. That was part of the Cubs calculation, that there's a lot of teams out there that are so analytically driven. Everyone has their models and their systems or whatever, but there are certain teams that are so locked in on that are going to see all those blue areas and be like, nah, we're good. We're like, that's going to give us a lot of concern. I think what Scott Boras would say is he loves the sprint speed, the arm strength. And I do think he has a point there. Like, Cody's made adjustments. Like, you're in this league for so long, you have to figure out, that cat and mouse game. I do think he's done some of that, and like now he's almost got penalized for it in a sense, if that makes sense. And one interesting thing, I'm not sure how this would play at Yankee Stadium. I'm sure it would play better though. As a left-handed hitter, Wrigley Field this past year was just a brutal place to hit, that it ranked either at or near the bottom of the majors. I want to say maybe 29th, maybe just ahead of Seattle, which is very unusual. So I do think that did suppress his numbers somewhat. And also, an average offensive player now, like those numbers are just suppressed across the board, so that even if he wasn't performing like an MVP, just being like a solidly above average offensive player is a big deal, even though his numbers didn't really like blow you away.
Yeah. What interests me is the base running. I think about that movie Rocky, where they asked, Stallone's character, why do you like Adrian? And he says, "Oh, we fill gaps. I got gaps." And I feel like Bellinger would fill some gaps. We all know that the Yankees don't run the bases too well.
That's what they do. Run the bases like drunks.
So, I see that 80% or percentile base running value, and I see the sprint speed, I see the defense, and I'm thinking, well, maybe he fills a couple of gaps for us. But let's talk a little bit. We can move on and talk a little bit about his defense. Now, you mentioned that his primary value is as a center fielder. Obviously, Yankees have a pretty good offensive center fielder in Judge. I contend he should be playing right field, which maybe he will if Soto doesn't re-sign. And if Soto does re-sign, he's probably going to have to move to left. But then you got Jason Dominguez, who's their top prospect. Had some defensive struggles, but as a center fielder, he should be okay. Do you think Bellinger would be okay, moving to first base for the foreseeable future, or will that hurt him contract time when he ultimately does become a free agent?
No, I mean, this guy is pretty unselfish. He would, and I will get to kind of what you asked, but teammates really enjoy playing with him, and just kind of he shows up. He loves baseball, which is another one of those things where should be obvious or you think would be automatic, and that's not always the case. But this guy loves getting to the field, hanging out at the cage, talking baseball with teammates, cracking jokes, all that kind of stuff. And so because of that mentality, he just wants to be out there. And I think his, highest theoretical value would be as an everyday center fielder. I'm just not sure how long that runway, realistically exists. But, he's moved around without complaint for a long time. I think in the modern game, when you're looking at matchups and planning for bullpens, to have a piece like that in your everyday group should be really appealing. And so I think this happened with the Cubs, kind of the scenario you're painting of, well, if this young guy pops or this guy comes up from AAA, that happened with the Cubs, and he fit in seamlessly. He just didn't have that MVP caliber year and wasn't on the field long enough, consistently enough to have that all-star caliber season. But there's still a lot of little things that add up. I think the issue with the Cubs at this point is he's being paid like a star. Yeah. And his first year there, he was that guy. I mean, he showed up in the MVP voting. He carried their offense for months. They dug out of this hole. I think it was 10 games under 500. And around this time, the Yankees, they were on him. The Cubs could have traded him. And in very far hindsight, maybe they should have, since they were one game out. But this is a guy who transformed the team. And part of it is his offense. And part of it is that defensive versatility that really gives you a lot of options.
Very, very interesting. Let's talk about his health, because you mentioned that he wasn't on the field a ton. He's definitely had some injuries over the years. You see the shoulder surgery there. He hurt it during the celebration. He's had some fractures here and there. A lot of collisions. This year he got hit by a pitch and missed some time. I'm just going to go ahead and quote Moneyball. Is he healthy? Is he a healthy player?
I would say yes. I mean, I think maybe this is what how I should have answered the center field question. It was he's ran into a lot of walls. And as you get I think he's maybe 29 now. As you get older, that kind of gets harder. I think there is an element of playing smarter that I do think he understands now. I think you can break up some of those injuries. A lot of them were kind of freak injuries and not really chronic stuff. The accumulation of those injuries in LA really got him out of sorts. That's part of why he had this precipitous fall from those MVP World Series heights. Like when you're trying to compensate, when you're trying to rush things, when you're trying to get back on track, like that's when your offensive game really suffers. And so I think Bellinger at this point has proven that there is considerable distance from that kind of rock bottom point in LA. Now, is he going to get all the way back to where he was in whatever year that was, 17, 18, 19, when he was like a, budding superstar? I don't know, but I do think you could catch the lightning in a bottle with this guy for a couple of months, the way that the Cubs did in the summer of 2023, and have a good, I think his floor is a lot higher now. I was there in Baltimore when that fastball hit his hand. I mean, there's nothing you can really do about that. And I will say, to his credit, maybe part of why the numbers weren't exactly where he would have wanted, he played through a lot of stuff. I mean, he came back faster from the broken ribs and the broken finger faster than the Cubs anticipated. Craig Counsell flat out confirmed that. I was a little surprised. And I do think that speaks to his competitiveness and some of the intangibles he would bring to whatever team he's playing for next year.
Nice. So another quote from Moneyball: "He's healthy-ish." It sounds like he's healthy-ish.
yeah. We're all day to day, right?
So let's talk about the price tag. As with all things, there is a price. Obviously, he carries with him a lot of money, and typically, when a player makes that kind of money and a team wants to unload it, the prospect haul is generally not huge because you don't have to pay that extra leverage in prospects. But if teams are looking at him in center field, other teams are looking at him at first base, there could be some competition. So you'd imagine that they'll get something back for him. So what are your thoughts on the price tag for somebody like Cody Bellinger?
I would say, one, the Cubs are not desperate to unload Bellinger's contract. To my understanding, there has not been some sort of mandate from ownership that they have to cut to a certain number, by whatever, January 1st. I'm just making up dates here. They have pretty general understanding of where they're going to be year to year, and Cubs ownership sets that around the CBT. They are fairly far underneath that. It's going to go quick because they have to get at least one legit starting pitcher. They'd like to get another catcher. They would like to throw a bunch more arms at their bullpen. That's just kind of basic roster stuff, to say nothing of how do you go from 83 wins to 90 wins, and what do you really want to do this offseason? So that's why they have to have these conversations of, okay, if they can unload Bellinger and his contract, maybe that opens another lane for one of several well-regarded prospects who are essentially at the AAA level now, or have had a cup of coffee in the majors. Could you then maybe just do more this offseason in other areas? That's kind of the logic here. I don't think the Cubs really need more A-ball prospects, to be honest. This is a well-regarded farm system. It's a front office that's under a lot of pressure to get this offseason right and make the playoffs next year. So I would imagine they would want some form of major league talent, or close to major league ready talent. And teams generally don't give that up. I will say Jed Hoyer has a pretty good working relationship with Brian Cashman, and that the Cubs like what the Yankees do, meaning they like Tayden Wisniewski. They've hired, I think at least one. I mean, the new Marlins pitching coach, Daniel Moscos. I always get He came up in the Yankees system. They traded Mark Leiter Jr. For a couple of guys who the reliever Neely made his major league debut with the Cubs, and they added, I may pronounce this wrong, I think it's Ben Knowles. They added him to the 40-man. Like, they like their players. They like how they develop them. They like their kind of pitching development structure. So, like, I don't know, in the course of all those deals, I'm sure they have a pretty good idea of what Cashman sort of values or what his inventory is. And at the same time, like, I don't know how many teams are going to have enough payroll flexibility to take on Bellinger, are going to like the player enough to value those intangible things we talked about earlier and be willing to actually, like, you know, kind of go for it for a guy who could only be there for 1 year. So I still think I'm still expecting to see Bellinger like in Arizona, you know, shortly after the Super Bowl, but I have a sense that these rumors are not going to go away like at all. I think it'd be interesting to see what happens with Juan Soto. That was part of the reason why the Cubs thought he might opt out, and that Boris could position Bellinger as a good, solid left-handed hitter for the teams who missed out on Soto. Obviously, he's not Juan Soto, but to get a really nice piece for a contending team. So I think that logic is now applied to the Cubs.
Very, very interesting. One last question before I let you go. How did Jack Neely look after they called him up? I was rooting for the Yankees to bring him up. I liked what I saw from him in the minor leagues. How'd he look?
I think he had a rough outing, and then it was kind of hard to crack the circle of trust at that point. But the Cubs are really high on him. I mean, he is like a legit, 6'7", 6'8". Like, he is. The Yankees do a good job of like finding those just big dudes, for those short inning relief bursts, and they're certainly putting him in that mix for next year, and they've shown that they don't like to pay big money for relievers. I guess they did when they traded for Aroldis Chapman a while ago, but at this point in time, they really like just kind of the volume approach of just throwing a bunch of arms at the later innings. And Neely is certainly someone who could really earn a nice opportunity. That's kind of how, Scott Efros was a great guy in Chicago. I know it hasn't worked out thus far in New York. He hasn't stayed healthy, but he was a nice success story for them as well, and a guy who kept earning more and more opportunities. And I'd imagine, Neely and Wisniewski in the same way of just, they have some holes in this roster. They know pitchers always get hurt. That was, one of the biggest stories in baseball this year. So I think a lot of those ex-Yankees will be on the Wrigley Field radar here. Wow.
Yeah, I think Wisniewski could end up being a solid pitcher. The Yankees are good at putting together those serviceable type of pitchers like the J.P. Sears and the Randy Vasquez and all these guys. So best of luck watching it this year. I hope that you guys have a busy offseason. Patrick Mooney of The Athletic and of Northside Territory, one of the sister podcasts of Pinstripe Territory and of Foul Territory. Thanks a lot for joining us, and to everybody watching, please like and subscribe, and go subscribe to Patrick's channel, Northside Territory. Patrick, thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Thanks so much, Derek. Same to you. Talk to you soon.
All right, guys. We'll see you later. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like and give us a subscribe. It helps other Yankees fans find the channel. We're also on all your favorite podcast platforms and social media. Join the community, have some fun. We're here after every game. This is Pinstripe Territory.